Hello, coffee lovers. Welcome to the 30th episode of By the Drip. This podcast is all about coffee, entrepreneurship, and the amazing people we meet through the story of coffee. In this episode, we talk with Juan Pablo Campos of Lojas Coffee out of Colombia. Juan works with Zarza, El Diviso, Patio Bonito, and Las Flores, four farms that have taken the competition world by storm. Juan also has an exporting business, Lohas, that focuses on organic coffees. We speak about the breakdown of that business, how they've worked on the competition scene, and a step-by-step on the infamous thermal shock processing techniques. Just last week, we used two of Juan's coffees in the Japanese Barista Championship in the milk beverage, an El Diviso Aji, as well as a Zarza Pacamara that won first and second place, respectively, in the Japanese Barista Championship. Congratulations to Hiroki Ito, the 2024 Japanese Barista Champion, and Jun Abe for placing second. Dave and I are super thrilled to have worked with these amazing competitors and to have worked with these amazing coffees from Juan Pablo. Let's get to it. Juan, we'd love to start with an introduction. So I witnessed something on the weekend that blew my mind. You're fluent in Japanese. I have to start there. I'm sorry. I have to start there
What's
because
the
I think
backstory?
people watching, they don't know.
Oh, they don't appreciate it. Maybe you could say a few words in Japanese just so they can understand.
はじめまして、私はロハズミーズの代表カンポスと申します。ぜひよろしくお願いいたします。
Wow. That is not scripted, folks. That was real.
First of all, thank you for having me on. It's really an honor. Very happy to be here. So yeah, I'll start with the background on Japan. My dad worked with Hitachi, a Japanese at that stage TV manufacturer, and my father set up a television assembly line in Colombia. And I grew up in a home where everything was related to Japan. So clearly, very very early on, at age 18, my father sponsored me to travel to Japan. And I was fortunate enough to be here for a year in an intensive Japanese language program, 8 hours a day, 1 full year, and that's how I got to learn Japanese. So,
Oh, wow.
so it was pretty intense, but it was great. So I after that I kept on coming back to Japan. I did actually my university here in international business at Sofia. Then I worked with our embassy. Finally, ended up starting a business with a Colombian-owned family-owned company that specializes in organic foods, including coffee. And so I've been selling coffee in Japan for over 25 years. So this is a market that is clearly very, very close to me. At Lojas, I have Japanese partners, and we have an office here. We have coffee shops. So yeah, this is a market that is very close to my heart.
Incredible. Yeah, that took me by surprise when I saw you on stage at the Japanese Barista Championship, and I'm looking at 3 Colombian guys, 1 Japanese person, and I'm thinking, who's translating for them? And then I saw you take the mic and do the full translation. Very, very impressive. So on a business note, is Japan your largest market for Lojas? Is it your sort of premier market for the business?
No, actually, the U.S. is larger in terms of volume, but then it would be Japan. And on the specialty end, on the high end coffees, yeah, Japan is definitely ranked up there. If not first, it would be second place. So it is a very important market.
Okay.
I'd love to hear how you got into specialty coffee. Where did your journey begin? Why coffee? Take us back.
Thank you. Well, so I started this organic food import company here in Tokyo in 2002. And by 2004, I was supplying certified organic coffee from the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta in northern Colombia to UCC, the largest coffee roaster here in Japan. And ever since then, I've been their main supplier for organic coffee. So I really started with organic coffee. And because our group, the company I was working back then, was producing coffee in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. So we started basically with that initial business, and then I got back to Colombia in 2011, and I wanted to. That's when I founded Lojas Beans, and I wanted to make Lojas Beans the main exporter of Colombian certified organic coffee. So I realized that Colombia was lagging behind in organic coffee production compared to the total volume of production. So we were ranked third in the world in terms of coffee production and 12th in terms of organic coffee production. So there was clearly a gap to be filled. And so I really went deep in the south of Colombia, particularly Tolima, and got around 20 associations of small scale producers certified organic and fair trade. And back then we were supplying Curie Green Mountain, we were supplying Chameleon Cold Brew, some of Pete's needs in the US. And so, yeah, we really grew the volume of organic certified coffee for a number of years until the market, climbed to the levels where we are right now, and organic coffee became too expensive for these big roasters, and they turned to another origin, looking for a lower, buying price point. And so, ever since about 5 years ago, we realized that we needed to get into a higher end of the market, looking for value for the company and looking for value for producers, because it happens as well that organic certified coffee tends to be commoditized, and larger traders squeeze the margins and end up really not paying producers the minimum margin or premium they need to cover the costs of organic certification. So it's a bit frustrating, I would say. So that's how we decided to move into specialty and really start growing volumes of what we refer to as microlots, which are really not microlots. I mean, in the sense of volumes, these are all lots that are produced in thousands of kilograms or tons, and that are really of huge impact to producers, and of course to us as a company as well. So that's kind of the summary of the story of how we started very focused on organic certified coffees, and then have really moved into the higher end specialty without abandoning the organic business. We continue to supply particularly importers and roasters that want to make sure that the right prices are paid, the traceability is there, the quality is ensured, that are really protecting the standard and protecting the philosophy behind organic coffee production. And so that's where we've kind of sticked to in terms of that certified coffee business, but really made a point of growing our presence in markets where we were not present yet, in new countries, and introducing the high-end microlots in those markets.
And how big is the organic side of the business compared to the four farms you mentioned earlier?
So I would say 50% of the business is certified organic, or a combination of organic plus fair trade or organic plus Rainforest Alliance. About another 10-15% would be regional coffees, mainly from the south, mainly Huila, that we source from specific regions in Huila, and that obviously have a particular profile and that are very much preferred for espresso blenders in particular. And then the rest would be organic. So we're now talking around 35 to 40% of the business is, I'm sorry, not organic, it's microlots.
And do those have to run through different facilities just on the basis of certification, or are the farms also certified organic, that the four farms we mentioned earlier?
So the four farms are not organic, and we source the organic coffee mainly still from small scale producers that are grouped in associations and that are in different regions of Colombia. So in the north, we have a number of associations that we work with in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, and then a lot in the south, in Huila and Nariño, Tolima as well. And we have a very important partner producer that is certified, that is actually hosting the PRF this week in Santander. It's called Hacienda La Pradera, and we've worked with Oscar Daza for over 15 years now. So yeah, we have. I would say that our relationships are very long term, very deep, very close. Not only with the four farms that we representing on the Microlot side, but with any producer association that we work with. We have extremely close, significant, meaningful relationships. So those associations are throughout Colombia, and then the four farms are not certified organic. And yes, we do process in different facilities. So we have a mill in Santa Marta, very close to the port, that is strategically located by the port to facilitate logistics in a country where logistics are difficult. So our mill in Santa Marta is certified organic, fair trade, and that's where we process all of the lots that are certified.
Okay, got it. Out of curiosity, you mentioned the percentage, sort of 35%, let's say the specialty side, and 65% is the organic volume side. Those percentages, is that based on volume or based on revenue? And if based on volume, I'm curious how it works in the revenue perspective. Dave and I have just had a lot of conversations lately from a roaster's perspective. The volume of blends and sort of entry level coffees, let's say the lower tier of coffees on a menu, the volume of production is often significant in terms of what a roaster is outputting, but then the revenue sort of shrinks down to meet the other categories that might be smaller percentages. I'm wondering if that's a similar perspective from your end in the production / export.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. So those percentages, 65-35 is volume based. And I would say revenue, it would tend to be not too different, but around, I would say it would drop around 10% on the microlot side of the business. So yes, it is not equivalent, volume and revenue exactly.
Right. Yeah, fascinating. On the roasting perspective, it's of course similar, but the volume coffee is what pays our bills, pays our staff, keeps us operating and keeps the lights on. It's the higher end coffees that maybe keeps us more motivated, engaged, and inspired, let's say.
Yes. However, the margins are obviously higher on the microlot side, not only for the company, for Lojas Beans, but for the producers as well. So our not only motivation but goal is really to continue to grow the microlot side of the business, because it clearly has a higher impact for producers. So for them, in the case in particular these four farms, and in particularly with Nestor Lasso, with whom we work to source some of the regional coffees in Huila, simply because of his attention to detail and to quality. So we source a lot of the regionals through him. So those end up being, kind of the bread and butter to keep running costs covered, etc., for them as well as for us. But really, the ultimate objective is to continue to grow microlots, and not so much on the competition end, because that's obviously a limited a market or world, but really on the middle segment of the microlots, where volumes can be grown, and margins are better than the standard and the regional coffees. So that is the mutual objective we have with Nestor and the rest of the team, is to grow that segment of very stable, very consistent, high quality microlots, but that are in that middle segment in terms of price point.
I have a question about the C market and it layering over kind of everything now. We're at, it's October 15th here. We've seen some new, pressing on near all-time highs. How does that affect your business and working with, different range of farmers and producers?
So it mainly affects it on the yeah. So mainly it affects it on the certified coffees and on the regional coffees, which are the ones that we sell and trade attached or linked to the C market. Um, so we try to buy and sell, fixing at the same time. So we avoid being long on inventory, and we're trying to fix a price. When we've bought the coffee, so that's when we fix the selling price, and that's to protect us, but also to protect the producers. So we're trying to do basically back to back business on all of the regionals and the certified coffees. On the microlots, it doesn't really affect that much. There's been obviously a lot of fluctuation on the sea market and on the currency as well, on the Colombian peso. So it obviously does have a fluctuation, a variation. So what I do with these four farms is that we trade with them based on dollars as well, so that we are being very transparent in terms of where that currency fluctuation is. So if it's moving in favor of basically depreciation, it's transferred to the producer, and if it appreciates, then in the same way it's cut down in terms of the pesos that we're paying to them.
And does the price of, green going up or the C market going up, does that affect sales of, I guess, more conventional coffee or organic coffee? Are you seeing people turn away because there's a premium on organic, or are people more willing to pay those prices because organic kind of trades at that premium?
Yes, it does. Clearly, we've lost big accounts on the certified coffees, because for example, Peru tends to be a much more reasonable origin for larger roasters to source certified coffees from. So whenever there's not such an attention or a need to have a specific profile and specific quality, those businesses are very sensitive to the movements of the sea market. And the premiums on top of that Colombia has always had on those coffees. So yeah, that is very sensitive. But then on the other hand, we have roasters that are very attached and committed and stick to a particular profile, a particular region, or even a particular association, because they've worked on marketing to present a specific group, a specific region. So those are the businesses that are much more stable, and we have those in different countries, in Australia, here in Japan, even in the US, customers that are very committed to a specific profile and a specific association. And so those tend to be very stable businesses.
And generally speaking, and I've asked some other people their thoughts and opinion on this, and I'd be curious to get yours, Juan. When the market goes up, we have a belief on the consumer end that farmers are getting paid that differential as the price rises. Can you maybe speak a little bit to how that equation works and who is truly benefiting from the C market price lifting or detracting?
So in Colombia, the Coffee Federation, we call it the FNC, the Coffee Federation publishes a price on a daily basis. And that price is based on the closing of the market, of the C market, and the closure of the exchange rate on a daily basis, Colombian peso against the US dollar. And they have a formula to calculate the price, and they publish on the website the daily price that is in effect for the next day. And that's the base price at which everyone buys coffee in Colombia. So to answer your question, yes, there is a clear transfer of any C market price increase, directly to the producer, because that translates into the purchasing base price for the next day in the domestic market. And in the same way, if the market goes down, then it will translate into a lower base price, purchasing point for any coffee producer in Colombia. And then the way it works is that each region, Huila, for example, or Nariño, they have a premium, a domestic premium over that base price. And that is
Mm.
pretty much handled by the large exporters, the multinationals. So Sucafina, Olam, Neumann, all of these, large exporters will have a specific price for each region announced in their warehouses. And that's at the price in which they're going to be buying the coffee in that location. So in Huila, they will use the FNC base price plus, you know, a certain amount of money per kilogram, and that's at the price at which they're buying the parchment. So yes, I think that when the C market rises, and the way we've seen it in Colombia recently, which is a rise in the C market and a devaluation of the peso, there is clearly more pesos going in the pockets of Colombian producers. So that is a reality, and that is very transparent in the way the market operates in Colombia.
Okay, that's fantastic. Glad to hear. That's similar, very similar to what I've heard before. So I'm compounding answers here for proof and transparency. That's great. And that price is based on cherry or pergamino that the FNC sets.
The price and the way the producers trade is mainly parchment pergamino.
Okay, amazing. Should we maybe zoom in to talk about the four? How do you describe them today? The championship farms.
Yeah, those are my premium partner producers for specialty coffee. So yes, let's zoom into that.
Maybe can we start just by talking about how you came to align with the four different groups? I believe Patio Bonito was the first in your catalog, but maybe run us through a timeline and maybe some story on how Lojas began to partner with these four globally recognized farms.
Yes. So actually, my first supplier was Las Flores, Johan Vergara.
Okay.
We started buying from Johan maybe 8 years ago. We started buying his pink Bourbon, which was very well known at the time, washed, and it was just very consistent, very clean. Very the notes on the pink Bourbon stood out very clearly, and we started buying that from him and selling it, it was very well regarded, appreciated by customers here in Japan. Probably since then, it was one of the first few markets that we introduced that pink Bourbon to. So Johan was our first point of contact, and then they started to grow in the relationship locally, domestically there in Huila, sharing experiences, experimenting with profile development with different processing techniques, and it was basically through Johan that we got to know Nestor from El Diviso next. Sarsa and Patio Bonito have been more recent relationships, so maybe 3 years old. Nestor, we've been working with Nestor at El Diviso for probably about 5 years, and we started very small. So it was basically just trialing their coffees, sending samples, the usual work that any exporter would do. You cup locally, and then you identify a profile that could be interesting for a customer. You write, approach, you make an approach on the coffee, send samples, wait for feedback, and it's time consuming, and it's typically small volumes, and the traction is not very fluent, not very fast. So we both started to connect more and more. I started to travel to Huila much more frequently, and we really just got into building a strategy to sell more coffees, to position their names. And then when they were able to succeed at the development of competition level coffees, that's when it really clicked to me that we needed to have a team strategy that customers around the world, competitors, and the industry in general would understand. It's like, okay, these guys are not just trading their coffees, but they're really working together to develop profiles, to market the coffees, to serve customers, to partner with different competitors, which is something that is very recent for us. I would say that it's only 2 years, the last 2 years, that we've really had a chance to work closely with competitors, and really add value to the equation, and not just present the coffees, not just send the coffees, but really send information, welcome them, host them, share knowledge, dive into what's being done behind the processing in a way in which it's easy for them to understand and to use at the stage, and therefore really just build relationships that are I guess at a different level. So yeah, that's a little bit of how we've walked through the past number of years into building this you know presentation packaging or form that you see today.
Well, it's been amazing to see kind of the rise of the farms in the last couple of years, especially on the competition level. Like last year, first and second, and then the year before first. I don't know if we've seen any farms come out that quickly and won so well. So what do you think leads?
You skipped a year there, Dave. The 2022, 2024, 2023 was not.
Yes. Yeah, Bor, I'm sorry.
Sorry to correct you. I hate doing the fact check
Bor,
on you. It pains me every time.
That hurts. Anyways, before that, just curious, why do you think these coffees have done so well in competition from kind of your point of view, and why the excitement around them?
Well, I think it's I would say that it's a number of producers in Colombia that have really gone, the extra miles to take Colombia to the competition scene. And I would give credit to a number of producers that have worked. I mean, I would say Granja La Esperanza started very early on. But ever since then, I would say there's at least 10 or 12 companies, producers. And I refer to some of them as companies because they are, very well structured families that have the resources and that have taken an approach that is organized, planned, systematic to produce and process competition coffees. And then there's the case of guys like El Diviso, Nestor and his brother Adrian, or Johan in Las Flores, or Sarsa, which is very recent. And it also has taken us by surprise, honestly, because it has been a very fast rise. But they have, and obviously in the case of Sarsa, he's learned a lot from the experience and just working side by side with Nestor and understanding what he's done. He's been able to cut the timeline quite short in his benefit, which is amazing. It's great, and that was the purpose of really interacting as a group, was to transfer a lot of that knowledge. But it was a very decided approach in the case of Nestor and Johan to getting to competition level coffees, and they've first did all of the trial and error over years. I would say at least 3-4 years. So before they really were able to succeed in the world scene, they had at least 4 years of building up internally, doing very small scale trialing of the different processing, the dry fermentations, the anaerobic fermentation, the submerged fermentation, the thermal shock, then the drying, and really experimenting, cupping, a lot of resources invested, because obviously many of these coffees, were not good enough to be sold, in competition, so they ended up being sold, in the domestic market. I wouldn't say as conventional, but just as a standard microlot. So a very significant and meaningful investment on their behalf to take the coffees to where they were. And I always give a lot of credit to them, because obviously the coffees is their work, it's their merit, is their processing. You know that competitors now recognize that kind of a stamp in terms of Nestor's way of processing coffees, and it's very distinctive and very clearly identifiable. And Johan has been able to develop his own, and now Sarsa and Patio Bonito in a way have also crafted their own way of processing and have that signature kind of profiles and profile development being perceived by competitors, judges, and roasters around the world. So I think that it was basically that process, very self-taught, but very disciplined. So they really went through the process of collecting data, of really understanding how each stage was expressing, either the floral notes or the fruitiness or the sweetness on the cup, and how they were able to take it to the maximum level of potential, expressiveness, and explosiveness, I would say, in the case of Nestor. And that's how he did it. That's how he was able to really create these profiles that are, and initially, I would say in 2022, they were even questioned, by international judges and people around the world as, this cannot be just fermentation. What is it? Are you infusing? What are you doing? Because it really caught a lot of people by surprise how he could take the profiles to that level of complexity and to that level of explosiveness. I would use that word again. So I think it's not coincidence. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of discipline, and a lot of systematic measurement of the conditions, the variables, the parameters, and then creating protocols to replicate those. And I would finally add that these guys, despite their very young age, and despite the fact that they have really no formal education in terms of university or technical training, but very basic, technical studies, um, they have been able to understand that not only that part of the systematic approach to the development and the creation of the protocols, but also they need to invest in the farms, and they've invested significantly in equipment, especially for the competition lots, for processing the competition lots at the fermentation level and then at the drying level. And that, I think, is what has been able to consolidate the development of those profiles. And that's why, like we saw last week here at the SCAJ in Japan, you continue to see not only competitors looking for these coffees, but the coffees performing very well on stage.
Can we talk a bit about the processing? Because I think that's the, I guess, marquee component of these farms. There's thermal shock. You mentioned a few others. Can you walk through listeners or viewers how that actually goes on, and then what is that doing to the coffee flavor wise, and then obviously that translates very well into competition.
So I had a chance to be in Russia at a Roasters Village event about a month and a half ago, organized by our importer there in that market, Colibri or Hummingbird. Very nice event, and there I was able to share um, the presentation stage with a very well regarded Brazilian um, scientist, PhD, doctor, and he really gave me a lot of complementary information in terms of the scientific data behind what happens in that decomposition of sugars present in the mucilage. I'll be happy to share some of the links of some of his research papers. And so for viewers, listeners who want to dive in deeper into understanding, I think it's very important to take the time to go through that reading process and understanding process on your own, so that you are confident enough to believe what is being told to you. So, but basically, what's happening is essentially decomposition of sugars, fructose, sucrose, and through that decomposition of the sugars by microorganisms, yeasts present in the cherry, and inside once the cherry is harvested, there is an opening, a cut on the surface of the cherry, and that immediately allows microorganisms present on the outside of the cherry to start going inside into the mucilage and immediately start a decomposition process, therefore a fermentation process. That is immediate. As soon as the cherries are picked from the tree, that process starts. And that's why in the case of competition coffees, for example, the protocol states that harvest should be done only from 5 a.m. until 9 a.m. before the sun starts hitting, before temperature starts rising, and you're able to move those cherries to the processing station, disinfect, and start the processing, the standardized processing, the controlled processing. Because if you wait too long, and if you bring back the cherries in the afternoon back to the processing station, the fermentation process is already taking place, and you have lost control of what is happening there in terms of temperature and decomposition of or breakdown of sugars. So essentially, we have a decomposition of sugars by microorganisms that turns it into alcohols, esters, and acids. And those are precursors of aromas and tastes once you roast the coffees. So it is all a chemical transformation that is taking place before you actually roast the coffee, grind it, and you start perceiving all of these fantastic, amazing aromas and tastes and flavors that you perceive in most coffees, and in particularly in the case of these competition coffees that Nestor, El Diviso, and Johan from Las Flores and Zarza Coffee are producing and processing. So yes, I think that getting back to your point of the stages, basically most of these coffees, and I will stick to the competition coffees, in the case of El Diviso and Las Flores, Zarza, they're all natural coffees, natural processed coffees. Patio Bonito is doing a washed SL28 that we're attempting and trying to take it to the level of competition. But in the case of the other three farms, they're all natural processed. And they all start with a disinfecting stage. Most of them, both El Diviso, Las Flores, are using alcohol at a 5% concentration when they disinfect the cherries as they arrive to the processing station. Then most of these coffees go through the producers refer to it, Nestor and Johan refer to this as oxidation. I like to use the term dry fermentation, which is basically the cherries sit either on a bag or on a tank, but it's exposed to oxygen. There's no water, and it's just cherries sitting for a number of hours. And that is controlled based on temperature, but typically it's going to be around 24 hours. That would be the average time in which they keep the cherries oxidizing or on a dry fermentation stage. Then this is followed by an anaerobic fermentation, but is in most cases is a time where the cherries are sitting on a drum with a closed lid cap on it. So it is partial absence of oxygen, not a total absence of oxygen. And then the third stage is submerged fermentation. And here you have a mosto recirculation. So they prepare a concentration of microorganisms, yeasts, on tanks from that particular variety. So if they're processing a ombligón, it will be the mosto or the concentration of yeast or microorganisms from the ombligón variety. And they keep this in a drum. They keep on feeding this mosto with sugar so that the microorganisms stay active and stay alive. A lot of people ask, oh, so you're adding sugar to the coffee. No, you're not adding sugar to the coffee. You're adding sugar to the concentration so that the microorganisms continue to decompose and stay alive. And basically what you're having is a very highly concentrated substance, liquid, of microorganisms. And then they transfer this 20 liters to 1,000 liters. That's the ratio they use when they're doing the bigger lots, but that's pretty much the ratio. So it's basically 2% of the mosto is added to the submerged fermentation, and it's recirculated. And this is going to take place for around 48 to 60 hours, depending on how intense you want the profiles to be. Since this is submerged, the temperature is controlled. The competition lots are done on a stainless steel tank that has a small computer attached to it and allows you to control the temperature, the time, the pH. So you're basically drawing a curve, a fermentation curve. And this, now they have the equipment. When they were doing the trial and error, they didn't have the equipment, so they were just doing small batches and cupping, and taking that fruitiness or those flavors to the maximum potential they wanted to take it to. So these guys identify that each variety has its own DNA in terms of profile potential, and then they work to adapt the stages of processing to express to the maximum possibility those particular notes. So in the case, let's say, of an ají bourbon or a geisha, these are coffees that are very floral. That the citrus notes tend to be optimal. So you start modulating or creating that profile development to express those particular notes the variety has in its DNA to the maximum possibility. In the case of a Java or an Obligón, you tend to look for those extremely red fruits, to very winey notes, but still pleasant, and that's how they're modulating the profiles. Once you finish the submerged fermentation stage, you basically are stopping the fermentation with 50-degree hot water. So that is what we refer to as a thermal shock. And there are two purposes of doing this washing or rinsing with 50-degree hot water. One is to kill all the microorganisms and stop the fermentation in one single moment. And the second is to open the pores on the structure of the bean and allow for a lot of these flavors that have been developed during the fermentation stage to be fixed inside the bean. And after 5 minutes, you wash the coffee again with 20-degree water. And what you're wanting is to, of course, bring down the temperature, and allow the bean to close its structure again. And thereby, the objective is to attempt to fixate a lot of these flavors that have been, or flavor precursors that have been created during the fermentation stage. And finally, and I'm sorry this is taking a little bit long, but
no, this is wonderful.
The final stage is really drying the coffee in a controlled atmosphere. So they've developed dehumidifiers. These are 1 ton, 1,000 kilogram equipment or dryers, and you're recirculating dry air, just capturing the moisture, retaining it on a coil, and extracting the water from the equipment, and just keep recirculating that dry air inside of the equipment. You are avoiding losing flavors and aromas, in comparison to open air drying or patio drying, because you're in a closed environment. And the equipment also has a computer that allows you to track and draw a drying curve in terms of temperature and time. So for the competition lots, you're able to now have a fermentation curve, a drying curve that we supply to the roaster that is going to roast the coffee for competition, and then allow him to modulate his own roasting curve based on the data that he has on the two previous stages. And I think that altogether, this is what's allowing these guys to succeed in the world stage, because it is really a very well designed and now parameterized and controlled processing system.
Well,
Cole, I know you got some questions. Come on.
I got some questions. I just quickly, I wrote everything down. So I'm curious if I've got this right to do a quick, 30-second summary here. So 5 to 9 a.m. we harvest. Cherries come back, so we avoid fermentation happening through the day through the split cherry. We do a 5% alcohol wash to eliminate all foreign material microorganisms that exist in the farm. 24-hour aerobic / oxidation. Then we move to an anaerobic stage. Then we move to a submerged mosto stage for 48 to 60 hours, where we recirculate the mosto from previous fermentations of the same variety. That's recirculated. I'm imagining kind of like a wine system, like a pump over style wine system, something like that. When you say submerged, everything follows a fermentation curve. When we decide the fermentation is done, we're hitting it with hot water. So thermal shock, 50 degrees Celsius, opens the pores, allows everything to kind of soak back in terms of flavor. And then after about 5 minutes, we have a cold water plunge to close the pores, similar to going to a place to get a facial or something like that. And then dehumidifiers to finish the processing, and everything follows a regiment curve. Fascinating to hear you explain all of that. I think I believe I captured everything that you said there in terms of step-by-step procedure. For me, a lot of it sounds similar to the world of wine. That's a lot more science-based, a lot more based on pump over sort of juice. I'm not describing that correctly, but a lot of wine would have the juice is drawn from the grapes, goes through a grate in the bottom, and then gets pumped back over through the skins. And that's where we have the development of tannins, we have the development of esters, alcohols, aromatics, all that sort of thing are coming through that stage in the world of wine. Also sounds a lot like roasting coffee, where when we're done the roast batch, we want the coffee to stop cooking immediately. So we're throwing it into the drum, we're pulling as much air through the drum as possible, and our goal is to cool it down as fast as possible using different techniques. One that we've been playing with a little bit lately is actually quenching and seeing what happens if we add water as a way to rapidly cool the coffee. And we've seen some interesting results, both good and bad, but playing with it nonetheless. Is this a practice that Nestor designed, that you designed? Did you find some inspiration elsewhere? How did this come to formulate?
Yeah, great, fantastic, and the summary is perfect. Thank you for the attention. I would say that two things. First, I want to mention the name of the Brazilian PhD doctor that I shared the stage with in Russia is Lucas Lousada Pereira. And I think anyone who's interested in really understanding this should really just Google him up, look at his papers, read through his papers. Fascinating, easy to understand. He's done a very, very in-depth, detailed work in mapping out specific yeasts, microorganism strains present in coffee cherries in Brazil. But that gives anyone the logic and the understanding of how this is happening and how this is taking place in different parts of the world in any, coffee plantation or any fruit, any food product. But let's stick to coffee.
We'll grab a link to the article from you and put it in the notes, the show notes.
Fantastic. We should do that. And he really links the specific microorganisms to specific esters or alcohols or acids that are going to be linked to specific floral notes, specific tastes. So when you have someone saying, "Oh, but this tastes like papaya," or "This tastes like mango," you're definitely infusing this. The science proves you wrong. The science proves you that there is specific microorganisms decomposing sugars and creating either esters, alcohols, or acids that are going to be linked to that taste that we identify in our mouths as mango. And that's how we really have now, science backing the logic of these processes. To your question of who developed this, I give a lot of credit to Nestor and Johan in particular. I think these are the two guys that have really, of course, working together with a number of people in Colombia, sharing information. But it's been them bringing the pure logic of what you just mentioned. How is processing done in other food products, in other beverages? And how can we apply that to coffee? How can we apply that logic to coffee? And it's surprising that it has taken Colombia so long to get into this, into really understanding how different processing methods and techniques could be brought into the coffee industry to improve quality. And I guess, and I'm not ashamed to say this, but to all the credit the Coffee Federation deserves in Colombia for having created a very organized and significant industry and sector that is well regarded around the world. They have also kind of put a ceiling on innovation, on creativity, and on really incentivizing producers to go out there and try new things. On the contrary, they have basically sent the message of this is the way we should process standard Colombian washed coffees. Stick to this recipe, don't do anything else. And I guess their inherence on most producers is so strong that most producers in Colombia, particularly elder aged producers, tend to say, this is what the FNC recommends, this is what we're doing. And I think that's the reason why it has taken so long for Colombia to really get into this innovation. And that's why I, give the credit to this, dozen or so producers that have said, that have completely broken that ceiling and said, we're going to go out there and try new things and innovate. And yes, for example, in the case of thermal shock, if you ask Nestor, he'll tell you this is, I learned this from basically the milk industry and pasteurization and the logic of really, just stopping the work of microorganisms in one single moment so that you can control the variables. If that's the point in which I'm satisfied with the cup and the profile, I need to make sure that I stop the fermentation there. And so, yes, the credit is all to them, to their work. What I've done from Lojas Beans is really first educate myself, study me, my team, my supply manager Camila, my quality director Anna, all of us. I mean, in the past few years, is like we really need to step up our knowledge, our understanding of what we're doing, of what's being done, so that we can communicate very well this to the world that's interested in this, that values, appreciates, and wants to understand the way these coffees are being processed. So that's been really our role to complement, to polish the language, the vocabulary, the way we write the profiles that we hand over to roasters, competitors, and to complement the work that Nestor is doing, and to, I guess in many ways reaffirm, reassure, give confidence to what is being done on the field, and back it up and support it with evidence and with a narrative that is credible to buyers and to roasters around the world. That's really, and I think that's very transparent in terms of how this team works and how we add value from the two sides to bring a better proposition or coffee, packaging or proposition to roasters and competitors.
Right. I have two questions. I know Dave's. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Come on,
I'll come back to it.
Okay. I wonder, we have processing, and I wonder if, do you guys call this a level up from processing, like engineering coffee? Because, we're probably going to start talking about this, but, your guys' coffee gets confused, or people, threaten with like infusions, or you're putting something else in the coffee. And how do we draw the distinction between traditional processing? To me, this sounds like, more engineering, or like really creating a system to make flavors, and then
it's food science.
Coffee is something else.
It is. I agree, and we talked with Cole a little bit about this during the show. It's food science, and I think it's education, and that's why I consistently go back and tell people, we all need to educate ourselves in order to give an opinion. Uneducated opinions are not fair. So anyone who passes judgment or makes a comment on a coffee lightly, I think it's irresponsible, because there's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of investment on a serious, profile development being done here. And therefore, I think that before you pass judgment on something, you need to educate yourself. So I think that, and that's what we were talking about before. And we see a role we need to play in Colombia as well, even in our domestic market, because there's just such little knowledge on coffee profile development. And then there is such a general way to talk about microlots that I really think we need to distinguish what is what. What are competition coffees? And that's why we're making a huge effort in talking about competition lots, and then educating, okay, how do you produce a competition coffee, and how do you produce a competition lot? What's behind it? What needs to be done so that you succeed? And then you can call it or put it in that category. To me, the rest are microlots, which are really nice coffees that you find on a farm, that maybe a producer has a craftsman way of processing, and he yields a good cup, but it's not consistent. He could have a very different result from crop to crop, or even within a crop from week to week, because conditions are changing. So I think that's very difficult to have consistency. And I think the sector, the coffee federations, needs to do a lot of work in terms of educating. And I think, unfortunately, they're not really reacting fast enough. So this is being done by the private sector, by the companies, to educate producers as well, who want to succeed, who want to get better prices, who want to, have a part in this top end segment of the industry, and also roasters and coffee enthusiasts or fanatics that are looking for information and want to understand this. So I think education plays a key role. We're actually hosting a farm visit next week, and we will continue to have at least two per semester, where we invite roasters to come and see them, see this for themselves. Mikael was kind enough to visit us before his competition last year, and I think it was a game changer for him, because he spent 10 days. I'm referring to Mikael Jason, the current world barista champion. I'm sorry that I just referred to his name, but he came and he spent a full 10 days, and he understood the processing, and he really got his hands into each stage, and really understanding what was happening in each of the stages. So I think education plays a key role.
Big guy, fire away with your two questions.
Throughout the process, so you're removing any yeasts and microbacterias. Then through the submerged component, there's a readdition of mosto, which we are kind of classifying as previous fermentations, and filled with all sorts of goodness in there, from inherent to the coffee cherry itself. Is there a readdition of yeasts that are coming into this processing style? Like we've seen some of the different coffees, Duo Cherry, Floral Symphony, some of the different titles that you've put on your coffees. Are those indicating a recipe that is utilizing the addition of yeasts within? Or strictly just the mosto from previous batches?
So strictly just the mosto from previous batches, to answer the question right away. We've done a few experiments. So with Mikael Jasin and Nestor Lasso, we decided to take on Mikael's suggestion to do a trial to process some varieties using Nestor's standard protocol of processing, but adding a luwak yeast that Mikael brought to us from Indonesia, dried, dehydrated, inoculated, and we did a trial, and it was fantastic. It did have a change on the profile. And we did several trials. We've done an ombligon, and we've done an ají, and we've done a chiroso. So now we've repeated the ombligon again, and it sells very well. It's actually been used now in competition already. So that is to say that the team, Nestor, Johan, they're not close to the idea of using treated, industrialized yeasts. However, their standard protocol, what we sell under our categories, the Floral Symphony, the Duo Cherry Velvet, these are all coffees that are processed only using the mosto. To the point of the Duo Cherry Velvet, my partner producers, Nestor and Johan, they refer to this as now I'm losing it. You need to cut this on when you
hydro honey, I believe, is the process.
Hydro honey. Thank you. I'm so used to calling it now. They do a cherry velvet. So hydro honey. This is basically half of the batch is half natural dried cherries. And when I say half natural dried, it's around 16% humidity of natural dried cherries that are then rehydrated, submerged in water, and depulped together with fresh harvest cherries of the same variety. And after they are depulped, they are fermented, anaerobic fermentation, then thermal shock, then dry. And that is the Duo Cherry Velvet, which is a very specific, or the hydro honey, very specific process We do only small batches because it's very time consuming. Because obviously you're half drying, then rehydrating, then depulping together, and then fermenting and drying. So it takes time, but it's very complex profiles. We had Federico Pina in Italy. He competed using a blend of our Duo Cherry Velvet Sidra and our Duo Cherry Velvet Chiroso. And we thought it was a mind blowing blend and combination to work with. So yes, we continue to experiment doing different processing. I've just now asked Johan to process for us a duo cherry velvet or a hydro honey of pink bourbon because we've never done this before. So we continue to play around and experiment with processing and varietals, introducing some processing techniques that we've done for a few varieties that have done well, but we haven't tried them with all the varietals yet. So we continue to work on that and see what we come up with and how we can anticipate trends and what competitors, what judges could be looking for
Right.
in terms of evolution on profiles.
Can you tell me your perspective? So many producers lead with the language that terroir is the end all be all of the industry. From what I'm hearing from this conversation and from tasting the different coffees that are in your catalog or from the different farms, processing is a significant driver of your collection. How do you kind of navigate and straddle that line of terroir versus process? Does the word terroir mean anything to you? Does it really matter where the coffee necessarily is grown, or do you think process is the true value of a cup of coffee today?
I'm going to have to borrow some phrases from Lucia Solis. I don't know if you know
Okay,
her, but
sure. She's been on this podcast.
so I'm going to have to borrow Lucia Solis, some of Lucia Solis' quotes and phrases on the point of terroir. And I think terroir should include or needs to include the human aspect because it is obviously that way of processing of Nestor Lasso and his brother Adrian Lasso, or Johan Vergara and his brother Diego Vergara, or Jonathan Gasca in the case of Sarsa, or Paula Trujillo in the case of Patio Bonito, that are giving the coffee and that variety the potential to the point where they want it. So I think it is a misconception when you refer to terroir in the case of profile, coffee profile, as to imply it only relates to the soil and the conditions of the farm, location, geographic location, altitude, etc. I think that it has to include that point of the human element and the processing techniques. So I think that clearly geographical location, altitude, soil conditions, nutrition play a significant role in terms of the potential the profile has, the profile potential development that it has, but it is the human aspect that is really defining to what point that profile is taken, to what level of expressiveness, to its full potential, not to its full potential. We're actually working with a company from South Korea called Xtone to use AI to create the full potential that each variety has in terms of the chemical composition, the chemical element composition. And then from there, have that as a baseline to see where your profile is and what you need to do to take it to its full potential. And to give roasters that data, because obviously, if you have more sugars, if you have more acid, if you have more alcohols, then your roasting profile should have that into consideration before you actually roast the coffee. And I think that is going to be the full circle when you're able to, use data-driven processing techniques and hand over to a roaster that information so that the roaster has more data before he's roasting his coffee. I believe that's really the full circle. So yeah, terroir to me it has to include the human component, the human element, and should not be understood only as soil conditions, geographical location.
That's a great answer. Thank you. I got my 2 questions, Dave. You go ahead.
Okay, buddy. We gotta end on, or not end on, but we gotta bring up Best of Panama. We had some controversies happen there, and they wrote a letter about infused coffees, and they kind of, I guess, called out a way to Colombian producers about it. And I just love to hear your thoughts on the letter, where you guys stand on. Feels like they were kind of taking a shot at you guys, and your response. Hunter did say that he thinks those type of coffees are good, but not in Panama, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, love to hear your thoughts on everything.
Again, I'll use some thoughts from Sakamoto-san from Act Planning, Kozo. We actually had a really nice session yesterday with Mikhail here at our coffee shop in Tokyo, which will come out in a couple of weeks. But a few weeks back, when we were in Russia with him as well, he was there in that same stage with Lucas Lozada, and it was great because Lucas Lozada started the presentation giving us all this scientific data. The next presentation was ours, giving all of these practical applications of processing in Colombia, which was not scientific because clearly none of us have a PhD on the matter, on the subject. So, and then came Sakamoto-san talking about infused coffees, and he had a barista champion there with him, and at the end he decided to prepare espressos and cappuccinos or milk beverages using our coffees. And the whole presentation of Sakamoto-san, which was very generous because I wasn't expecting this, was these are not infused coffees. So you need to understand what is infused and what are not infused coffees. These are, as we've now seen from the 2 previous presentations, these are scientific-based processing techniques that yield these profiles, complexities, multi-layered profiles, and sensations on the mouth that infused coffees don't give you. Infused coffees give you a punch of a specific taste. Peach, strawberry, whatever it is, it just gives you that. But you don't have that texture. You don't have the layers. You don't have the viscosity. You don't have the velvetiness on the mouth feel, on the long finish, on that experience that you feel in the mouth when you have, an Obligón, an Ají, a Java from these guys. And I think that's the underlying difference. And then Sakamoto-san brought up also the letter from the Panama producers. And he basically said, well, and I agree with that, and that's why I'm bringing it up. I think they should stick to their story, which is an amazing success story. But, I think the Panamanian producers have no space in commenting, criticizing, or judging producers in any other part of the world. So I think that it's fantastic. They have a specific set of rules and standards for their processing of the geishas in Panama, their competition, the best of Panama. And anyone who wants to buy those coffees, who wants to produce and sell through those, farms, should abide those rules and play by the rules. But those rules apply to that competition, to that, program of Best of Panama, and that's it. The rest of the world is free to do whatever they consider, and those who want to infuse coffees and have a market and customers to sell infused coffees are welcome to do so. I mean, it's fine. In our case, we just feel that we need to, again, I'm getting back to that point, educate, communicate, share knowledge. By the way, we're very generous with the information we supply. We welcome visitors. We share detailed data on our processing techniques, and the reason is because, to the point of terroir, it's almost impossible for any other producer to get a Obligón seed, go plant it anywhere else, and yield the same exact profile that Nestor Lasso yields with his Obligón. It's almost impossible. So why not share knowledge? Why not share techniques? And enrich the industry, the sector, allow other producers to process fantastic coffees. There's a space for everyone. So I think, to that point, the letter from the Best of Panama, I think it was unnecessary to send a punch to any other producer around the world. We didn't take it personally. Yes, we're on a mission to educate and communicate and continue to process fantastic coffees and market them in as many places as we can around the world.
Juan, thank you so much for your candid answers, for your transparency, for running us through what you do with Lohas beans and what the team of Diviso, Zarza, Patio Bonito, and Las Flores are doing on the ground. We'd love to come visit someday and see it all firsthand. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we kind of close out the call here? Just looking at time, we like to keep our episodes around the 1 hour mark. So if you have anything else you'd like to add.
No, just my appreciation for having me here, for giving me an opportunity to communicate and to speak. And congratulations to the work you're doing with competitors around the world. Anywhere we can partner and bring our coffees to be considered by competitors and roasters around the world that you can introduce us to. We're more than happy to cooperate and honored to be a part of what you're doing around the world as well. So thank you so much for having me. This is a great opportunity.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Yeah, we had great results with the Ahi from El Diviso in the Japanese Barista Championship. We had great results with Pacamara from Zarza. We've had great results with your coffees, and look forward to tasting new profiles, tasting new innovations, and seeing what the next steps are for yourself and the team. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys. Safe travels. Enjoy Hong Kong.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.